The law also bans gender-affirming surgeries, though that provision is not at issue before the High Court. See, again, that's interesting. So I bet you conservatives will pretend like what's at issue here is surgeries for minors, when that is literally not what they're debating. They're debating whether or not puberty blockers or hormone treatments can be given to any trans youth. Providers who violate the law can face $25,000 civil fines. The administration's challenge of Tennessee's restrictions stands to impact similar laws passed in roughly half the country. In other words, the Republican states, to the surprise of nobody, they're all cracking down on trans healthcare. And if the Supreme Court rules against, allowing doctors to provide trans healthcare to minors, then this could be the case in half the states or even more than half the states, setting up a high-stakes battle that has attracted national attention and demonstrations outside the courthouse Wednesday. The dispute comes as Republicans increasingly lean into anti-transgender messaging, with millions spent on related campaign ads this cycle, and a blitz of recent legislation restricting the bathrooms transgender Americans use, sports teams they join, and medical care they receive. At the heart of the current battle is what level of scrutiny the law should receive. The Biden administration asserts Tennessee's ban should be treated as a form of sex discrimination. For decades, the court has subjected such cases to intermediate scrutiny, which requires the government to show the law is substantially related to an important interest. SB 1 regulates by drawing sex-based lines and declares that those lines are designed to encourage minors to appreciate their sex. What the fuck does that mean? U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar said, Tennessee said its law classifies by medical purpose, not sex, so it only needs to clear a lower level of scrutiny known as rational basis review. Just as using morphine to manage pain differs from using it to assist suicide, using hormones and puberty blockers to address a physical condition is far different from using it to address psychological distress associated with one's body. See, to me, when you read that, and read that over and over again, and tell me what your takeaway is, when I read that, it sounds like what they're saying is being trans is not actually a thing. In other words, living in extreme mental, psychological distress because your gender doesn't match your gender doesn't match your gender identity, or your sex doesn't match your gender identity. They say, well, that's sort of like an opinion thing and a feeling thing, and it's not real ironclad medical stuff. So therefore, we should make a law against giving trans healthcare to any minors, even just hormones and puberty blockers. See, again, at the core of the right-wing belief on this, it literally is just that I don't think trans people are a real thing. Like, I don't think it's a real thing. And for the life of me, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that argument, because there was a time back in the day where people said about gay people, I just don't think anybody's actually gay. It's almost like, okay, even if you like the same sex to one extent or another, suck it up and marry the opposite sex, because society shouldn't accept us, right? That's sort of like the idea. And it's a similar notion here. It's like, they can't wrap their minds around the fact that some people are born biologically one sex, but effectively have the mind of the opposite, and they want to live that reality. They want to live that truth. Imagine how big and authoritarian a government you have to create to say you're not allowed to do that. And I'm going to give you numbers in a second, by the way, just so you understand what we're talking about here. Why isn't this simply a case of age classification? Conservative Justice Clarence Thomas pressed the government, sympathizing with Tennessee's position. LGBTQ advocates are holding out hope for a repeat surprise victory at the conservative majority Supreme Court after Justice Neil Gorsuch, President-elect Trump's first appointee, wrote the court's majority opinion in 2020, ruling that an employer firing someone based on their sexual orientation or gender identity violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Biden administration insists the same reasoning applies to the Equal Protection Clause, and Tennessee's gender-affirming care ban should be invalidated. But during Wednesday's arguments, Gorsuch didn't ask a single question. He spent most of the time reading documents or holding a pen to his chin as he listened to the attorneys. The court's liberals, meanwhile, sympathized with the Biden administration's citation of major medical organizations that consider gender-affirming care safe and medically necessary. Quote, the evidence is very clear that there are some children who actually need this treatment, isn't there? Justice Sonia Sotomayor said. The Justice Department is challenging the law alongside 3 transgender adolescents in the state, their parents, and a Tennessee doctor who treats gender dysphoria. The case's high stakes have attracted significant attention, with dozens of outside groups filing briefs backing each side. The Justice Department's challenge drew support from Democratic attorneys general in 19 states and Washington, D.C., various LGBTQ advocacy groups, 164 Democratic lawmakers, Representative-elect Sarah McBride, who is said to become the first openly trans member of Congress, actor Elliot Page, and the American Bar Association. Tennessee officials are backed by 25 Republican state attorneys general, various conservative legal groups, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and dozens of athletes who oppose transgender women competing in women's competition, including former swimmer Riley Gaines and former tennis star Martina Navratilova. Competing rallies, one organized by conservative organizations including the Alliance Defending Freedom and Do No Harm, and one held by the American Civil Liberties Union and Lambda Legal, drew upwards of 1,000 people outside the court Wednesday. All right, so we're going to... Let's get to that now. So we have video from one of these rallies. So there were protesters and counter-protesters, people on the side of trans people and people who are in favor of banning trans healthcare for all minors. And here's Matt Walsh speaking at this event. And listen closely to what he says here, because he really gives away the game.
So to the trans activists over there claiming that this is all about the rights of children, I say again, yes, you're right, it is. They have a right to be protected from you. Children have a right to be protected from all of those people over there who want to harm them and damage them and destroy them.
So in other words, he's saying kids who are trans, they're only becoming trans because it's a fad, and there's like trans rights groups that are tricking kids into wrongly becoming trans. That's what Matt Walsh is saying.
And they will be. They are going to lose. They are losing right now. We are not going to let them harm our children. This case is just the beginning of the fight. It is not the end. We are not going to rest until every child is protected, until trans ideology is entirely erased from the earth. That's what we're fighting for, and we will not stop until we achieve it.
He's not going to stop until trans ideology is totally erased from the earth. As I said, he doesn't think trans people are real. He doesn't think they're real. What he thinks is they're falling for a fad and going along with it wrongly, or they're complete degenerates, and he thinks they should be forced into a box of whatever your biological sex is when you're born. You have a duty to fulfill that throughout your life. That's his point. That's what he's saying. He wants to erase gender ideology from the earth, which is his way of saying, we don't think anybody should be trans. I mean, look, he openly said, we covered it at the time, he openly said it should be illegal for doctors to perform any sort of transgender affirming care. It should be illegal for them at any age. So even if it's an adult, he really is not in favor of them being trans. This is what he said. So look, here's the reality of the situation, and this should be the least controversial thing anybody said ever. There are plenty of instances of you have a kid, and the kid says, hey, I feel like a boy or I feel like a girl or whatever, and they want to live that reality, and the parents sort of, work with them and try to help them and try to walk them through it and try to understand where the kid is coming from, and then you have, okay, well, let's see whatever process there is out there. You go talk to a therapist or a psychiatrist or some sort of a doctor, and you try to evaluate, hey, is this kid actually experiencing gender dysphoria? How severe is the gender dysphoria, etc.? And in those instances, there are some kids that will get treatment. Now, in every case, the treatment is either hormones or puberty blockers. They actually don't do, bottom surgery until they're past a certain age. I don't know exactly what the age is, 16 or something like that. But in almost all the cases, it is just hormones or puberty blockers, and you have the approval of the parents as well as the some doctors who would have to sign off on it. That's how it works now. He wants big government to get in there and say to the doctor, no, you're not allowed to do this. Say to the therapist, no, you're not allowed to do this. Say to the parents, no, your kid's not allowed to do this. He wants massive authoritarian government overreach to get into people's lives and control their lives, because he thinks, or he pretends, like in an instance where a kid is trans, it's really deranged, ideologically captured parents who are like forcing their kid into being trans, and that's evil and that's wrong. And look, it would be wrong if any parents are forcing their kid to be anything one way or the other way. just because their ideology fits. Of course, that would be wrong. But I'm sure that almost never happens. Maybe you can find the one fringe, tiny-ass case of some weird parents that do some weird shit, of course. But I got news for you. Whether you're a liberal, a lefty, a right-winger, whatever, nobody looks